So I'll kick off the panel session by first asking Kim, do you think that what work you do with the industry in terms of a concept to proof of concept, is that really applicable for school sector also?
Absolutely.
I mean, you heard the example of they didn't even know that they want to make a VR, but they've now got a platform and they're kind of creating content very easily. So what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, look, I think it is. I mean, I think Mark said that, you know, everything's a business ultimately, and you know, we need to consider outcomes. And I think the Ravenswood team had sort of stolen my thunder a little bit around that, in that, and my strong belief is we have to start with what we're trying to achieve from an outcomes perspective. You see, I look at the technology as not the end point, but the channel to deliver something. So, be it VR, be it AR, be it, you know, we do robotics and translation technologies. All of these things are just delivery methods for content and learning outcomes. So you know, I think from a business perspective, a lot of our commercial clients allow us to work through a process starting with what are we trying to achieve? What are you doing now? What's working and what's not working? And if you had a magic wand and you could wave that, what would you love to be able to deliver? And then from there, we then start to say, okay, well, what are the outcomes and measurements that we're going to be able to prove? Because at the end of the day, to move away a little bit from what you said about you know, gimmicky stuff, which is where we started in this space, and to get into a place where we can prove not only sort of generate outcomes, but prove that they're there, and then get more funding and get more sort of buy-in from the powers that be. That's very, very, very important.
So, in other words, what Kim is trying to say is that where we are in the industry is even though we've been around for more than 20 years, we are still listing use cases. We have not proceeded from listing use cases to making business cases, which is what business wants, or, you know, any consumer wants, kind of a thing. Now, I will go to the other extreme. James, what are you seeing as the trends of VR, AR, XR from a pedagogy perspective in education and specifically school education?
I think there's still a huge amount of worry and fear. From some of the research that we've been doing, Experience Pulse, where we've been engaging educators, there is that anticipation of this is exciting, we're really excited for this, but there's also fear of technology failing, there's also the fear of, and I think it's still being proven, but the real fear of the effects of screen time on our brains, particularly those younger years of development. How much exposure do we have with the VR and the AR to our children in any time frame, over a day, over an hour, over a week, over a year, and also with the, I believe, disconnection with the natural world. How much do we allow for that virtual reality, augmented reality experience, and then forget about the realities, which is emotions, the natural environment, and so on and so forth. So I think it's on a fine balance. And educators, as one of us said before, we're not stupid. And that it is important to recognise that whatever we put into an educational setting needs to have some basis behind it in terms of supporting us as an active citizen in moving forward into the 21st century, not replicating what we already know.
So I'll come back to you because I'm more keen to understand what kind of research you're doing and how does that compare with the research that Erica is doing. But first let me get Carlos, but now I'll call you Luis. Luis, can I get your perspectives in terms of what do you see as the trends of VR, AR, XR in education?
Yeah, for us it's more about scalability. So the team that I'm leading, we are 13 developers, and UNIC has funded my operation. It's already costing me $500,000, and they are pushing me so hard.
Can I join you?
Yeah, it's just too much, but for us it's about scalability. Yeah, so what we want to do is basically, our solutions are just simple web-based, make it scalable, and so it can be used by everyone. The main problem is obviously has to do with the headset. You know, the headset is a headache. So that's the main concern that we have. I see immersive technologies becoming part of learning processes. We are researching the links between what is empathy and learning. what is immersion and learning. We are doing, as you have mentioned now, even biofeedback. We're doing brain waves, readings, and we're trying to understand if this actually is going to improve learning. Because, I mean, if at the end of the day, all these technologies doesn't improve learning, then we just go back to reading books. You know, so for us and for me, particularly with the business cases that I have to put, is for me simple. Prove to me that if they put whatever they put, they're going to get a better grade. That's all I have to do. And I'm in the process of trying to do that. So where is it getting? Where is it heading? It's heading to the fact that we need to prove the value of immersion and XR, which is AR, VR, whatever you go, as a learning tool. Once we prove that, because no one has done it, once that is proved, then it's just going to explode really big.
And a way to prove that, which will go to what I think you're all about, is, and what we've spoken about here today already, is quality content.
So I'll come back to now, when I come to you, Mark, the question really, which is, most of the discussion today has been on virtual reality. And there is no two ways that at this particular point in time, virtual reality is having a bigger share of this reality market. But all future forecasts are indicating that the future is going to be more about augmented reality. So what do you see that, and what does it mean for what you discussed just 10 minutes back?
It's very interesting, and I very much agree, by the way, with regards to the challenges of the learning platforms, which is also one of the big reasons, and it ties into the concept of augmented reality, specifically in the way that I've currently been using it, which is essentially a layer to help control a standard non-head-mounted display environment, which allows a high level of engagement and amusement, and it's very cost-effective. And by doing that, we're actually allowing ourselves to slow the heck down. Okay, I actually will tell you, this sounds counterintuitive, but in some respects, what I would love to see the greater virtual tour photography, virtual reality photography, and videography world do is slow down and think about what they're actually creating in terms of content. And by doing that, by slowing down, we can think about, okay, what am I actually capturing? What am I actually doing with this? How is it going to be used? How beneficial is this? And by doing that, by taking those steps back, we can basically not just shoot. It's kind of like when DSLRs first came out, the first digital cameras came out. People take photos of food, they take photos of everything, right? It's kind of nuts. Like, as you get to that point where it doesn't matter anymore, right? Well, if we were able to slow down and you only post once in a while, what happens? Funny thing, people start to care. Why? Because you probably took more time to do a better job with it. So augmented reality's tool, as a tool, can be used on top of standard 2D high-resolution content. Well, let me ask a simple question to the group. How often have you looked at anything that's a VR content and you pinched? You know, when you pinch in on a mobile device, or you zoom in with your scroll mouse. You usually do, right? What happens when the quality's bad? You go back. Why? Because it was bad. Right? So if you have the ability to shoot at a higher level of quality, the chances are that when you zoom in, you go, hey, it's still cool. That means that the cool factor in that space will allow the platform to continue to grow.
Just on the other end of that spectrum, if I may, just to ensure we've got the voice of the educator from a pedagogical standpoint, there is a great opportunity for enhancing learning experiences in terms of learning processes, problem solving, curiosity, inquisition, all those great things that you were talking about before. And so I think that's important that we do allow for our students to engage in, because it is going to be part of their reality. So just keep that in mind, that it is about quality content if you're a content provider, but it's also about that opportunity for learning experiences in that space of technology and engineering.
I would argue that you need to let kids sandpit and play,
Yeah, for sure.
experiment, and produce lots of low quality content actually as a journey towards something else. And that's just as valuable a learning experience as having the perfect shot. I mean, what worries me is that, you know, what you've got to understand is that the way we learn is through challenge, through failure, through having a go, through taking a risk, and that's the stuff we need to encourage in this space with engagement with technology, not perfection.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you know what? Can I just say that's what teachers need to do as well, because we'll never meet perfection because we're not the technologists.
It's actually,
guys,
I
you know,
don't
we're
want
not,
you to
and that's okay,
misunderstand.
that's
We will,
okay.
so both
Sorry,
points are
I'm just saying,
no,
that's
absolutely valuable perspectives,
I'm
and I agree with both of them, you know. So now I first want to ask the audience if they have any questions to ask, any burning questions to ask, for any four of these people over here.
You must have done
Right.
a really good job.
Folks are making a real big impact.
Well, I've actually got one on. In terms of...
Can you introduce yourself,
Yeah,
please?
my name's Akshar Shukla. I'm a student of Murdoch University. Well, I've got a question regarding the legal side of virtual reality. So we've got a lot of data being collected across the board using other forms of media and mediums themselves. Now, with virtual reality itself and what we're viewing, for example, with children in particular, what sort of data collection would take place there? Do you think that is law actually there to actually protect children against that?
There's a number of ways of answering that. It depends on how you actually look at it.
There's
I'll give you an example of one of the things I do. I make sure that if children are going to be in the imagery, I obviously get model release forms from people, okay? All right, or I blur them out, or I just make sure they're unrecognizable from a copyright and from a protection of data and from a privacy perspective.
Yeah.
That's just common sense, just being respectful. You know, like I know that if I don't want my photo to be taken all the time, but I don't mind most of the time. But and the same thing would be the case with everyone else. So it's about having respect.
So could I just say something about that? I mean, look, to the broader question of privacy, I mean, obviously we've seen a lot in the press recently with what happened with Cambridge Analytica and Facebook and others, and I think the law struggles to stay ahead of this technology in a big way. I've been involved in data and personalisation for 20 years, and it seems to me that the legals of things are always 5 to 10 years behind where the technology takes us. So I think we need to pressure governments to become much more responsive to be able to provide levels of security and privacy in some of those areas. And also industries, I think, bodies need to take some responsibility for providing codes of practice in this space in a big way.
Well, biometrics is a key issue with VR. So
Absolutely.
biometrics, I mean, would you like to talk to that? Because I feel very strongly about that, particularly with children's data. The
Yes.
issue around biometrics, and the law is way behind. We don't even have that
Yes.
specifically mentioned in the privacy legislation.
Yes. Oh, look, the privacy legislation was only updated a couple of years ago and it's already out of date.
Well, it's like what Carl's doing with brain to computer interface.
Yeah.
Like we have we do a lot of research now on that, and we basically, when we put the application on for ethics, the ethics, how you call that, the ethics group or whatever, basically I have to explain them every single detail of the data that is going to be obtained, and when I showed the device, actually they thought I was going crazy, or maybe, I don't know what they thought, because they just couldn't understand what I was talking about. So there are no frameworks. When you talk about VR, put a headset, they were like, oh, are you going to make them sick? And I'm like, no. When they put the thing in the head, are you going to read their thoughts? No. So it's kind of like,
I'd like to know about that if you're doing that.
yeah, it's
But these are fair enough. I mean, these are the questions that are being put out there by educators.
Yeah, absolutely.
And rightly so.
Yeah.
So we have to overcome those challenges.
It's
But there's the
interesting
language.
too.
And Scott, got to say, like, the issue with VR though, immersive VR, is that the big companies that run that, which are Facebook, because they own Oculus, their privacy, even if you read their disclaimers, they will track your movements eventually.
Oh, look,
There's no
they
doubt,
already-
and there will be eye tracking, and there will be biometric data captured. And the thing about it is we need to be vigilant, I suppose, as consumers and teachers around what we're putting kids into, because this isn't just data about you, it's data of you.
So this
It's
is
about bodily integrity.
And it goes further because if what the brain to computer interface does take place with it, it's not biometric data that's actually on the surface or superficial, it's actually inside.
I know.
And that gets, and as crazy as that was, as what Carlos might have experienced with his ethics committee, this is actually very real now. And you are able to actually capture data.
Well, that's an ethics committee, so they do have high standards of ethical commitment, but tech companies don't, sorry.
no, you have to. I think this is why it's wise to engage independent people
Yes.
when you're consulting in this space, because you don't want anyone who's tied to a company or tied to a specific platform or whatever. If you want to get in, I think it's vital to get independent advice from someone who works in this field, who can say, look, I recommend you do this for these reasons. Here are the risks over here. Because, you know, if you don't think Google and Facebook know everything about you, you are kidding yourself, and they have for 15 years. Honestly, and I'm not saying that just slightly. I mean, you know, the information that's contained on individuals is pretty significant, and you know, they're very careful with the way they structure things. But at the end of the day, I think our approach to privacy is different now. Young people have a different view of their privacy than my generation. I mean, we were obsessive about not letting people know what our address was, and you know, if you look at what you know millennials post these days, you wouldn't. I mean, I've got 2 daughters, you know, so it's definitely an issue that both the law and associations and tech manufacturers need to catch up with.
So, any questions from the audience? If that be the case, then in the interest of time, thank you very much. It's pretty obvious that the data security and privacy is a big issue, and yes, we will cover it up in one of the later sessions in more detail. There are some very, very interesting perspectives which are very well discussed over here, but yes, it's a big issue. So please give a round of applause to the 4 gentlemen over here. And my sincere apologies that I did not get the gender mix right, and I should have got 2 females over here, but my apologies. So thank you very much.